Good evening and welcome to the joint meeting of the Assembly Committee on Ways and Means and the Senate Committee on Finance. Committee Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Senator Canizero. Senator Dondero Loop. Senator Goycochea. Senator Harris. Senator Neal. Senator Wynn. Senator Severs-Gansert. Senator Titus. Assemblywoman Anderson. Assemblywoman Backus. Assemblywoman Brown-May. Assemblywoman Dickman. Assemblywoman Gorlow. Assemblyman Hafen. Assemblywoman Howdigi. Assemblywoman Kasama. Assemblyman Miller. Assemblyman O'Neill. Assemblywoman Peters. Assemblyman Watts. Assemblyman Yeager. Chair Monroe Moreno.
And I am here. Will you please mark any members that were not here at roll call present as they arrive? We ask for your apologies for the delay in the start of today's meeting, but there's a lot to go through. If you are here for the Department of Administration State Public Works Division's budget closing, we are not going to do that budget report tonight. We're going to put that off to later this week. So I apologize if you were here for that one. We have a lot to cover tonight, and we will get started. And we will start with the first item on our agenda, and that's the legislative branch, and invite Director Good evening.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I picked a taller chair tonight, so hopefully that helps. We have before you the same document that we provided on Saturday, April 29th. And we weren't sure if you wanted us to go through that or if there was anything that we could add or to answer questions. And I think I just remembered that I forgot to say my name is Brenda Erdos. I'm with the Legislative Council Bureau, and with me is Dan Russian, our CFO.
Thank you so much. I don't think you have to go through that presentation all over again. Members, this was a closing difference on Saturday. The Assembly passed this. The Senate did not. So this will be a Senate vote. So for this vote, I will turn it over to Chair Dondero Loop.
Good evening. Thank you very much, fellow Madam Chair. I would ask for a motion to approve this agenda item. Thank you very much, Senator Canizero. A second from Senator Wynn, I believe. And any discussion on the motion? Senator Gansert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We discussed this at length the other day, and so this is just for the operating side of the LCB budget they were talking about. And with the proposed, we're opposed to the expansion to Southern Nevada, at least the scope of the expansion that was presented the other day. And so we will, I'll be opposing the additional staff because we will be increasing staff by, I believe it's about 71%. As well as the cost of staff, I think it was 55%, one or the other. So we think the expansion is too large as far as the scope. We do agree that we need to have some offices down south for some of the employees that have been proposed, and I think there's about 30 between fiscal staff, legal staff, research, and audit, and that we could house the 30 folks without adding 117 total. Thank you.
Any additional comments? Okay, with that, I will ask for all those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Nay. Nays from Senator Gansert, Senator Goycochea, and Senator Titus. Motion passes. I don't see anybody else. All right, just wanted to make sure I got y'all. Motion passes. Thank you very much, and I'll hand it back to Chair Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Ms. Enrose. Moving on to the next item on our agenda, which is the Governor's Office of Economic Development.
Good evening, Madam Chair. I'm Tom Burns. I'm the Executive Director for the Governor's Office of Economic Development. I'm here to answer any questions along with staff that has the pertinent information, and should you have any.
Thank you so much. And we'll have staff go ahead with this closing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, members of the committee. For the record, I am Morgan Barlow, Program Analyst for the Fiscal Analysis Division. Before the committees, the Governor's Office of Economic Development's budgets were heard on April 22nd. 2 of those budgets were deferred to today. Those budgets are on page 1 of your packet. Those are the Governor's Office of Economic Development Budget Account 1526 and the Workforce Innovations for New Nevada Account 1531. Budget Account 1526 are the Director's Office budget. There was 2 major items brought before the committee members on April 22nd. The first major closing item was regarding 2 new positions. On page 5, the committee's decision can be seen. The committee's approved those 2 new positions and associated expenditures. The second major closing item brought before the committees is on page 6, and that is of 2 budget amendments that were submitted after the budget hearing that the committees had not previously heard. And the committees had decided, if you may recall, to defer this decision unit until after the economic forum. And so these budget amendments are found on page 6, include budget amendment A231581526, which recommends general fund appropriations of $153,146 in fiscal year 2024 and $153,896 in fiscal year 2025 to restore funding to the Governor's Office of Economic Development marketing expenditure category to pre-pandemic levels. This was based on a 5-year average of historical expenditures. The other budget amendment that was submitted is A231621526. And this recommends general fund appropriations of $165,000 in each year of the 2023 to 25 biennium to restore funding of the Governor's Office of Economic Development's international travel expenditure category to pre-pandemic levels, also based on a 5-year average of historical expenditures. The committee can see on page 7 that the decision is as follows. Do the committees wish to recommend approval of Budget Amendment A231581526, general fund appropriations of $153,146 in fiscal year 2024 and $153,896 in fiscal year 2025 to support marketing activities, and/or Budget Amendment A231621526, general fund appropriations of $165,000 in each year of the 2023-25 biennium to support international travel for the Governor's Office of Economic Development.
Thank you for that. Members, if you remember correctly, in the governor's original budget recommendation, in the marketing activities budget line, there was $116,419 in FY24 and $115,699 in FY25. With the budget amendment of A231581526, it would add an additional $153,146 in FY24 and $153,896 in FY25. I would accept a motion to bring the difference, not approve the budget amendment as written, however, to bring the difference up to $153,46 in FY24, adding that to what was in the governor's recommended budget. That would be an additional $36,727 in FY24 and $38,227 in FY25 to make up the difference in that. And then to approve amendment A231621526 for the international travel. I would accept a motion for that.
So moved.
I have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Backus. Any discussion on the motion? Senator Ganser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would support this motion. I think it makes sense to make sure they can do the international travel and raising their marketing fees, some, but not completely $153,000 a year makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to note out on page 7 was the other closing item that was brought before the committee. The committee approved the other closing item. Moving on to page 9 of your packet is budget account 1531, the Workforce Innovations for New Nevada budget account. This budget, the funds in this budget can be used to develop and implement programs to provide customized workforce development services to persons or authorized providers that create, expand, and relocate businesses to Nevada. As a reminder, this budget is funded with general fund appropriations. There was a singular issue brought before the committees on April 22nd, that of the new Workforce and Economic Development Capacity Grant Program. The governor recommends $12 million in fund appropriations in each year of the 2023-25 biennium to support the new Workforce and Economic Development Capacity Grant Program in consultation with the Nevada System of Higher Education to be awarded to Nevada's higher education institutions. During that meeting on the 22nd, it was discussed the historical funding levels of this budget account. That can be found on top of page 10. It was also discussed the projections for how these funds would be utilized with the Nevada System Higher Education institutions. A table of that can be found on page 12. As a note, while the recommended enhancement unit only allocates funding to the new recommended Workforce and Economic Development Capacity Grant Program, the Workforce Innovations for New Nevada budget account will continue to receive workforce development projects requests from various entities. The agency identified $20 million in potential workforce development programs over the 2023 to 25 biennium. And as noted in the following section, the governor recommends a $20 million one-time general fund appropriations for the Workforce Innovations for New Nevada budget to support these traditional workforce development grant projects. Once again, this funding will be considered by the money committees at a later date. The decision for the committees is as follows. Do the committees wish to recommend approval of $12 million in general fund appropriations each year of the 2023 to 25 biennium to support a new Workforce and Economic Development Capacity Grant Program for Nevada System of Higher Education institutions as recommended by the governor? If so, the committees may wish to approve back language in the 2023 Appropriations Act, providing that any money remaining in the Workforce Innovations for New Nevada account at the end of fiscal year 2024 does not revert to the general fund and must be carried forward to fiscal year 2025, and that any money remaining in the account at the end of fiscal year 2025 must be reverted to the general fund. This language is similar to what was included in the 2021 Appropriations Act.
Thank you so much for that report. Members, seeing that there is a one-shot that we will have a bill on later for the $20 million, I will accept a motion to not approve this decision unit.
So moved, Madam Chair.
I have a first from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Senator Gansert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, the one thing about doing that is that there's no certainty that the other $20 million is going to be approved, and so I think we're making an assumption that that's going to be approved. So I guess, I don't know if there's a way to make this contingent, that we approve this if for some reason the $20 million one-shot is not approved.
Members, any other discussion? Seeing none, and with your comment, we could approve the $20 million now, not approve this decision unit, and we will not have to do the bill. Any discussion on that motion? Just the regular WIN program, $20 million.
So both of these were recommended by the governors, and it's become an either/or, which is kind of a false choice because I need to know more about the bill itself, I guess, and what that funding specifically is for, because I haven't heard that bill.
That 20 million one-shot was in the governor's proposed one-shots that was presented to the committee. We can move forward with the motion. We have a motion on the floor. And we can move forward with the vote on that motion, and then we can deal with the one-shot bill when it comes across. Okay? See no other discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And then please raise your hands. I have a no from Assemblyman O'Neill, Assemblywoman Dickman, Assemblyman Hafen, Assemblywoman Kasama, Senator Titus, Senator Gokachia, and Senator Severs-Gansert. The motion carries. You can continue.
Okay, to clarify, for the back language, how do the committees want to address that?
We would not have to do the back language because we did not approve it.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes my portion of this presentation.
Thank you so much. And then we'll move on to resolve budget differences. It's the next item on our agenda. One minute recess. Thank you for your patience. We'll come back to order. The next item on our agenda was budget closing differences for the Office of the Governor, 101-1000. The Assembly voted in one direction, the Senate was in another, and I will turn the meeting back over to Chair Dondero Luke.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. I would like to ask for a motion to rescind our vote from Saturday. I don't remember the date. Whatever date Saturday was. And I accept a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move to rescind the Senate's previous action to allocate the 1.2 million for positions.
Thank you very much. Second from Senator Wynn. Any discussion? All those in favor say, oh, I'm sorry, Senator Gansert, I did not see your hand, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's my understanding that the governor's office actually amended and rescinded the request for those positions. It's also my understanding that the governor has a modernization bill to which we can add positions if they believe they need more positions. So I'm going to support this, given that information that we provided today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Thank you very much. And now I will ask for a motion to close as the Assembly did regarding this particular item.
And thank you, Madam Chair. I would move that we also close this without approving, I believe it was 2.7 million for several cabinet secretary positions. I would well, that will be the motion, and then I think I may have a comment on the motion when we get to that point.
Thank you very much. So the motion is from Senator Canizero, a second from Senator Wynn. Any discussion on this motion? All those in favor say aye. Sorry, Senator Canizero. I'm just trying to get through this meeting.
No, I appreciate it, the efficiency, Madam Chair. Just one brief comment. We did get an amendment from the governor's office that they were removing those cabinet secretaries, and so I think there's still a discussion to be had about additional stuff and what those needs may be. There was also a previous action by this committee to give additional money to the governor's office. I believe it was $315,000 per year of the biennium in order to provide for some additional money for salaries. And so I think that there's still probably a discussion to be had about what the appropriate piece is here, but we'll be supporting the motion.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion on this motion? All right, I think I'm safe. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Thank you very much, and I'll turn the gavel back over to Chair Monroe Moreno.
Thank you so much. Moving on to the next item on our agenda. It is our reports from subcommittees on budget closings, the Department of Administration. Good evening, gentlemen. You can start whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Yuri Yakovlev, LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. I'm accompanied by Morgan Barlow and Daniel Miller, and we'll be presenting the Joint Subcommittee on General Government Closing Report for the Department of Administration, excluding the State Public Works Division and the Capital Improvement Program. The Joint Subcommittee on General Government has completed its review of the Department of Administration budgets for the 2023-25 biennium. When compared to the governor's recommended budget, the subcommittee's closing recommendations resulted in an increase in general fund appropriations of $10,824 in fiscal year 24 and $7,795 in fiscal year 25. The following comments describe the more significant recommendations of the subcommittee. The first budget is the Director's Office, Budget Account 1337. The subcommittee recommended approval of a technical adjustment to increase cost allocation assessments by $59,142 in fiscal year '24 and decrease cost allocation revenues by $9,650 in fiscal year '25, representing a rate of $1,345.47 per FTE in fiscal year '24 and a rate of $1,229.28 per FTE in fiscal year '25 to meet the targeted 30-day level of reserves. The subcommittee further recommended approval of a technical adjustment to increase general fund appropriations by $10,824 in fiscal year '24 and $7,795 in fiscal year '25 to fund operating and equipment costs for the administrative assistant position, which supports the Nevada Commission for Women. Moving on to the administrative services, budget account 1371. The subcommittee recommended approval of administrative charges totaling $337,050 over the 2023-25 biennium for one new accounting assistant position and one new management analyst position for the capital improvement program team. The subcommittee further recommended approval of budget amendment A231071371, which recommends administrative charge revenues totaling $395,778 over the 2023-25 biennium for two new budget analyst positions, and recommended approval of budget amendment A231081371, which recommends administrative charge revenues totaling $14,685 over the 2023-25 biennium to reclassify an existing accounting assistant 2 position to an accounting assistant 3 position. The EATS Agency IT Services, budget account 1365. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendations as adjusted to increase interagency transfers by $520,376 over the 2023-25 biennium to fund the transfer of the on-base digital document management system from the Nevada State Library and Archives and Public Records to Agency IT Services. EATS Computer Facility, budget account 1385. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation as adjusted to increase mainframe service fees by $828,000 over the 2023-25 biennium to fund contracted staffing for the mainframe unit. Increase infrastructure assessment fees by $764,753 in fiscal year '25 to replace the endpoint device protection system. And increase virtual server hosting fees by $650,000 over the 2023-25 biennium to fund hybrid cloud orchestration software licenses. The EATS IT Security, budget account 1389. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation as adjusted to increase security assessment fees by $363,954 over the 2023-25 biennium to fund the expansion of the Tenable Security Center contract. Hearings and Appeals Division, budget account 1015. The subcommittee recommended approving an allocation from the Workers' Compensation and Safety Fund totaling $111,678 over the 2023-25 biennium for one new administrative assistant position as recommended by the governor to serve as a scheduling clerk in the Las Vegas hearings office. Human Resource Management, budget account 1363. The subcommittee recommended the elimination of 3 vacant compliance investigator positions as recommended by the governor, which would increase reserves by $417,652 over the 2023-25 biennium. Mail Services, budget account 1346. The subcommittee recommended approval of reserve reductions of $206,945 over the 2023-25 biennium to reestablish the Equipment Depreciation Fund transfer from the Mail Services Division budget to the Mail Services Equipment budget. The Nevada State Library and Archives and Public Records, budget account 1052. The subcommittee recommended approval to transfer the on-base document management system from the Nevada State Library, Archives, and Public Records to EATS, reducing interagency transfers by $260,188 in each year of the 2023-25 biennium. The purchasing, budget account 1358. The subcommittee recommended approval to reduce reductions to approval of reserve reductions of $489,097 over the 2023-25 biennium for one new purchasing officer, one new purchasing technician, and one new management analyst position as recommended by the governor. The subcommittee further recommended approval to increase federal coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds by $1.4 million over the 2023-25 biennium, to fund the lease for the space associated with storing personal protective equipment at the Southern Nevada warehouse, to eliminate federal coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds of $856,172 associated with the Southern Nevada warehouse lease that would expire on June 30th, 2023, and to change the funding source of one program officer position from federal coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds to reserves. The subcommittee recommended closing the following Department of Administration budgets as recommended by the governor, with or without technical adjustments. The Juvenile and Family Court Judges, Budget Account 1302, Deferred Compensation Committee, 1017, EATS Office of the Chief Information Officer, 1373, EATS Data Communications and Network Engineering, 1386, EATS Telecommunications, 1387, EATS Network Transportation Services, 1388, Fleet Services, 1354, Fleet Services Capital Purchase, 1356, Human Resource Management Agency HR Services, 1360, Human Resource Management Unemployment Compensation, 1339, Mail Services Equipment, 1347, Nevada State Library and Archives, the State Library, 2891, Nevada State Library and Archives Library Cooperative, 2895, the IPS Equipment Software, 1053, Federal Surplus Property Program, 1367, and finally, Insurance and Loss Prevention, 1352. And that concludes this report.
Thank you so much. Members, any questions on this closing report? Seeing none, I will accept a motion to approve as read by staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would make that motion.
Thank you. I have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, second from Assemblywoman Bacchus. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on. Thank you. That takes us to our next item on the agenda, the Department of Education. Good evening. You can start whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, members of the committee. Liliana Camacho-Polco, Fiscal Analysis Division, for the record. I'm joined by my esteemed colleagues, Madison Ryan and Adam Drost, and we are here to present the closing report for the Department of Education. The Joint Subcommittee on K-12 Higher Education, CIP, has completed its review of the Nevada Department of Education budget recommendations in the executive budget for the 2023-25 biennium. The closing recommendations of the subcommittee resulted in a decrease in general fund appropriations of $6.9 million in fiscal year 2024 and $6.8 million in fiscal year 2025 when compared to the governor's recommended budget, not including department-wide indirect cost allocation adjustments. The subcommittee recommended approval of the following closing actions. For the Office of the Superintendent, Budget Account 2673, the subcommittee recommended approval of a reduction in federal grant revenue of $96,365 in fiscal year 2025 related to an expiring grant and continuation of an education program supervisor position by replacing expiring federal grant funds with a general fund appropriation of $96,365 in fiscal year 2025, as recommended by the governor. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended that the department eliminate this position from the base budget for the 2025-27 biennium, given the limited duration of the federal grant work that would be assigned to this position. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $500,000 in each year of the 2023-25 biennium for document translation services, but recommended this funding be placed in reserve and provided direction to the department to expend the federal funding authorized for document translation services in the department's COVID-19 funding budget prior to seeking the interim finance committee's approval to utilize the reserve funds for translation services. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended approval of general fund appropriations inclusive of various technical adjustments for the following additional travel-related expenditures. $16,750 in each year of the 2023-25 biennium for out-of-state travel, $12,573 in each year of the 2023-25 biennium for in-state travel, $9,206 in each year of the 2023-25 biennium for State Board of Education travel, and $16,426 in fiscal year 2024 for Commission on School Funding travel expenditures and staff travel expenditures to support the Commission. For District Support Services budget, Budget Account 2719, the subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for total general fund appropriations of $521,383 over the 2023-25 biennium, reflective of various technical adjustments for one new management analyst position to assist with supervision of the grants management unit, one new management analyst position to support the electronic grants management system and oversight of grant awards, and one new management analyst position to assist with subgrants and associated expenditures. The subcommittee also recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $160,887 over the 2023-25 biennium, inclusive of technical adjustments for one new management analyst position and associated expenditures to assist with risk assessments and monitoring. For the COVID-19 budget, Budget Account 2710, the subcommittee recommended approval of revised expenditure projections for the elementary and secondary school emergency relief, ESSER 2, ESSER 3, and the Governor's Emergency Education Relief, GEAR 2 programs in fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 as provided by the department. The subcommittee also recommended approval of the revised funding for federal emergency assistance to non-public schools program over the 2023-25 biennium based on updated expenditure projections provided by the department, which totaled $20.2 million in fiscal year 2024 and $2 million in fiscal year 2025. The subcommittee recommended the coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds in this budget be closed as recommended by the governor and provided fiscal staff with authority to enter a technical adjustment to reflect funding provided by Assembly Bill 495 of the 2021 legislature of $198 million in fiscal year 2024 as requested by the department. The subcommittee also recommended that the full committee issue a letter of intent to the department requiring status reports on the ESSER 2, ESSER 3, and GEAR 2 programs provided to the LCB Fiscal Analysis Division 30 days after the close of each quarter for submission to a subsequent interim finance committee meeting. Finally, the subcommittee recommended a letter of intent be issued to the department and the State Public Charter School Authority to provide status reports at the end of each fiscal year on the use of funding provided by Assembly Bill 495 of the 2021 legislature by school districts and charter schools. Department Support Services Budget 2720, the subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for reserve reductions of $223,864 over the 2023-25 biennium for one new administrative services officer position and associated expenditures to assist with budgeting and fiscal responsibilities. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for one new management analyst position and associated expenditures to assist with contract management funded with reserve reductions of $164,457 over the 2023-25 biennium, inclusive of technical adjustments to reduce equipment expenditures. Finally, the subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for reserve reductions of $117,836 over the 2023-25 biennium for one new accounting assistant position and associated expenditures to assist with the department's accounts payable functions. For the Standards and Instructional Support Budget, Budget Account 2675, the subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $223,139 over the 2023-25 biennium, inclusive of various technical adjustments for one new education program's professional position and associated expenditures to support the Nevada Digital Learning Collaborative and the statewide learning management system, Canvas, which provides distance learning opportunities to students and teachers statewide. The subcommittee also recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $408,711 over the 2023-25 biennium, inclusive of technical adjustments for two new education programs professional positions and associated expenditures to support professional development in science and English language arts. On April 28, 2023, after the subcommittee approved its closing recommendations for this budget, the Governor's Finance Office submitted Budget Amendment A23-331-2675, recommending general fund appropriations of $2.3 million in fiscal year 2024 and $2.4 million in fiscal year 2025 for the continuation of the Canvas Learning Management System through June 30th, 2025. The members of the committee may recall that the Interim Finance Committee approved ESSER funding totaling $2 million in April 2023 to fund the Canvas Learning Management System in the 2023-25 biennium. The department indicates if the budget amendment is approved, this ESSER funding would be reallocated for other unspecified purposes. However, the full committee should consider revising the budget amendment, to incorporate the $2 million in ESSER funding previously approved by the Interim Finance Committee in April 2023 to reduce the requested general fund appropriations for the Canvas Learning Management System to $257,191,000 in fiscal year 2024 and $2.4 million in fiscal year 2025. Accordingly, the full committee could consider the following options, which you will find on page 6. And the options for the committee's consideration are A, approve budget amendment A23-331-2675, recommending general fund appropriations of $2.3 million in fiscal year 2024 and $2.4 million in fiscal year 2025 for the continuation of the Canvas Learning Management System through June 30th, 2025. This option would allow the department to reallocate the previously approved ESSER funding of $2 million for other unspecified purposes. Option B, approve budget amendment A23-331-2675 with revised general fund appropriations of $257,191 in fiscal year 2024 and $2.4 million in fiscal year 2025 for the continuation of the Canvas Learning Management System through June 30th, 2025. This option would require the department to utilize the previously approved ESSER funding of $2 million for the Canvas Learning Management System. Or option C, not approve budget amendment A23-331-2675, recommending general fund appropriations of $2.3 million in fiscal year 2024 and $2.4 million in fiscal year 2025 for the continuation of the Canvas Learning Management System through June 30th, 2025.
Thank you so much for that. Members, as staff stated at our April IFC, we appropriated the $2 million for the Canvas Learning, so I would accept a motion to go with B as discussed by staff.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I would make the motion to approve item or option B with the Canvas Learning Management System.
Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries.
Thank you, Chair. And continuing on page 6, the Assessments and Accountability Budget Account, 2697. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $1.6 million in fiscal year 24 and $1.8 million in fiscal year 25 to fund projected increases in assessments and reporting contracts. However, the subcommittee recommended this funding be placed in reserve, which would generally require interim finance committee approval before it could be utilized, thereby requiring the department to provide additional justification before utilizing this reserve funding. The subcommittee also recommended approval of general fund appropriations of $934,535 in fiscal year 2024 and $992,535 in fiscal year 2025 to provide funding for the increased cost for administration of the measures of progress assessment based on the vendor contract documentation. The subcommittee also recommended approval of the elimination of funding for end-of-course exams as recommended by the governor, contingent upon passage of Senate Bill 9 or other enabling legislation. For the Data Systems Management Budget, Budget Account 2716, the subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for a general fund appropriation of $501,114 in fiscal year 2025 to fund the continuation of the campus analytics and campus learning products for the Infinite Campus Student Information System. The subcommittee also recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to eliminate federal statewide longitudinal data system grant funding of $1 million over the 2023-25 biennium to reflect the expiration of the federal grant and general fund appropriations of $309,927 over the 2023-25 biennium, inclusive of technical adjustments to allow for the retention of 2 grant-funded positions using state funding. Finally, the subcommittee recommended approval of the budget amendment A23071-2716 that recommends general fund appropriations of $1.1 million over the 2023-25 biennium to support the single sign-on identity management system for the Student Accountability Information Network. For educator licensure, Budget Account 2705, the subcommittee recommended the continuation of the Professional Development Management System by recommending approval of Budget Amendment A23313-2705 that recommends American Rescue Plan Act Corona State Fiscal Recovery Funds of $500,000 in fiscal year 2025. The subcommittee also recommended the full committees issue a letter of intent to the department requiring the department to study the possibility of new user fees being collected in the 2025-27 biennium for the ongoing maintenance of the Professional Development Management System and the management analyst position that supports the system, and any legislation needed to allow for the collection of such fees. The study would be provided to the Interim Finance Committee no later than August 1st, 2024, for consideration as the agency-requested budget and the executive budget are prepared for the 2025-27 biennium. For the Office of Early Learning and Development, Budget Account 2709, the subcommittee did not recommend approval of the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $3.1 million in each year of the 2023-25 biennium to replace braided funding historically supplied by the providers of state pre-K program services used to fund approximately 368 additional pre-K seats. The subcommittee also did not recommend approval of the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $3.2 million in each year of the 2023-25 biennium to replace federal governor's emergency education relief funds to fund 377 pre-K seats, but rather recommended federal coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds of $3.2 million in each year of the 2023-25 biennium be used for this purpose. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $2.5 million in fiscal year 2024 and $5 million in fiscal year 2025 to provide an additional 300 pre-K seats in fiscal year 2024 and 600 pre-K seats, inclusive of the 300 additional pre-K seats that would be added in fiscal year 2024 in fiscal year 2025. In total, the subcommittee's recommendations increase the total number of seats for the state pre-K program to approximately 3,026 seats in fiscal year 2024 and 3,326 seats in fiscal year 2025, based on an annual per-seat cost of $8,410. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $226,602 over the 2023-25 biennium, inclusive of technical adjustments for the addition of 1 new education programs professional position and associated operating costs to support data collection and reporting for the Office of Early Learning and Development. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended including federal grant funding of $10 million in fiscal year 2024 and $9.7 million in fiscal year 2025 for the Federal Preschool Development Grant, Birth Through 5 Renewal Grant, and associated expenditures. For Safe and Respectful Learning Budget, Budget Account 2721, the subcommittee recommended approval of general fund appropriations of $76,146 in fiscal year 2024 and $193,000 in fiscal year 2025 to fund annual licensing fee for the Safe Voice Reporting System, inclusive of Budget Amendment A23-239-2721 and a technical adjustment to reduce general fund appropriations by an additional $116,854 in fiscal year 2024 due to federal funding of $116,854 identified in the department's COVID-19 funding budget to fund a portion of the annual licensing fee for the Safe Voice reporting system. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $173,587 over the 2023-25 biennium, inclusive of technical adjustments for the addition of one new program officer position and associated operating costs to support the Safe Voice and Handle with Care programs. The subcommittee also recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to eliminate federal grant fund revenue of $2 million over the 2023-25 biennium to reflect the expiration of the Trauma Recovery Grant and the new School Climate Grant, and recommended approval of the continuation of a program officer position by replacing expiring federal grant funds with a general fund appropriation of $78,479 in fiscal year 2025. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended approval of Budget Amendment A23-237-2721, which eliminated general fund appropriations of $1 million over the 2023-25 biennium for school climate and working conditions surveys. As approved by the Interim Finance Committee in October 2022, the school climate and working conditions surveys will instead be funded with American Rescue Plan Act Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Funds. For Student and School Support Budget, Budget Account 2712, the subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $1.2 million over the 2023-25 biennium to fund a new school improvement program for Nevada's lowest performing schools and one new education programs professional position to support the new school improvement program. The subcommittee recommended not approving the governor's recommendation for a general fund appropriation of $265,000 in fiscal year 2025 to fund external evaluations of K-12 education programs. Additionally, the subcommittee also recommended to not approve the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $100,000 over the 2023-25 biennium to expand the functionality of the NDE's existing Smartsheet software. Instead, the subcommittee recommended reserve reductions of $100,000 over the 2023-25 biennium in the Department Support Services budget, Budget Account 2720, to provide the funding to expand the functionality of the department's Smartsheet software. Finally, the subcommittee recommended to not approve the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $30,676 over the 2023-25 biennium, reflective of technical adjustments to fund Zoom executive licenses. Instead, the subcommittee recommended reserve reductions of $30,676 in each year of the 2023-25 biennium in the Department Support Services budget, Budget Account 2720, to purchase Zoom executive licenses. For the Literacy Programs budget, Budget Account 2713, the subcommittee recommended approval of general fund appropriations of $249,200 in each year of the 2023-25 biennium to fund the development of a revised Nevada State Literacy Program. The subcommittee also recommended approval of general fund appropriations of $47,000 in each year of the 2023-25 biennium, inclusive of technical adjustments to provide funding for Nevada Reading Week events. For the Career and Technical Education budget, Budget Account 2676, the subcommittee recommended approval of general fund appropriations of $678,013 in each year of the 2023-25 biennium, consistent with the legislatively approved funding in the 2021-23 biennium and inclusive of technical adjustments to the base budget and decision units providing for in-state travel, out-of-state travel, fringe benefits, and statewide inflation. The subcommittee also recommended additional general fund appropriations of $73,887 in each year of the 2023-25 biennium. This additional funding was recommended to be placed in reserve, and the department was directed to seek the Interim Finance Committee's approval to utilize these funds should an additional increase in federal Carl D. Perkins grant funds become available and additional state funding is needed for the federal maintenance of effort. For the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act budget, Budget Account 2715, the subcommittee did not recommend approval of the governor's recommendation to transfer a portion of the Nevada Alternative Assessment from the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act budget to the Assessments and Accountability budget, and instead recommended continuing to fund 23.2% of the Nevada Alternative Assessment with Federal Individuals with Disabilities Education Act funds. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $226,602 over the 2023-25 biennium, inclusive of technical adjustments, for the addition of one new education programs professional position and associated operating costs to assist with federally required tribal consultations. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended approval of Budget Amendment A23-126-2715 to transfer the Indian Education Grant and Education Programs Professional Position and associated costs from the Student and School Support budget to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act budget. The subcommittee recommended approving funding of $77,096 in fiscal year 2024 and $96,491 in fiscal year 2025 for the addition of one new grants and projects analyst position and associated operating costs to manage various Office of Inclusive Education data. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended that this position be funded 50% with general fund appropriations and 50% with Federal Individuals with Disabilities Education Act grant funds. The subcommittee also recommended that the full committees issue a letter of intent directing the department to study the time and effort for this position and how the funding should be cost allocated between Federal Individual with Disabilities Education Act grant funding and general fund appropriations in future biennia, and report its findings to the Interim Finance Committee by August 1st, 2024, for possible consideration as the executive budget for the 2025-27 biennium is developed. Finally, the subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for Federal Individuals with Disabilities Education Act grant funding of $250,910 over the 2023-25 biennium, inclusive of technical adjustments for the addition of one new education programs professional position and associated operating costs to monitor local educational agencies' administration of this federal grant. The subcommittee recommended closing the following department budgets as recommended by the governor as recommended by the governor with minor or technical adjustments. Educator Effectiveness, Budget Account 2612. Gear Up, Budget Account 2678. Parental Involvement and Family Engagement, Budget Account 2706. Continuing Education, Budget Account 2680. And Budget Account for Alternative Schools, Budget Account 2672. The subcommittee also recommended approving technical adjustments noted by staff and authorized fiscal staff to make other technical adjustments to the Nevada Department of Education budgets as needed. The end.
That was a lot. Thank you. Members, any questions on the closing report for the Department of Education? Seeing none, I will accept a motion to approve.
I would make a motion to approve this budget as read, and the reader gets an A+.
I have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much. Then we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the Commission on Mineral Resources. Good evening. You can start whenever you're ready.
All right. Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. For the record, my name is Colby Nichols, part of the LCB fiscal cohort for the evening. Sadly, up here by myself to go over the Joint Subcommittee on General Government's closing report for the Division of Minerals, which was considered by that body on April 28th. The subcommittee has completed its review of the Division of Minerals budget and has made the following recommendations for the division's 2023-25 biennial budget. Those closing recommendations have resulted in no changes to the general fund appropriations, and the following comments describe the more significant recommendations of the Joint Subcommittee for the Division of Minerals budget. The subcommittee recommended approval of a new unclassified geographic information systems analyst position to serve as a dedicated specialist for these systems. The position's duties would include data modeling and forecasting, inclusive of a technical adjustment to add various position-related costs inadvertently excluded from the governor's recommended budget. The costs associated with the position would be funded through reserve reductions of $92,607 in fiscal year '24 and $118,641 in fiscal year '25. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended approval of Budget Amendment A23107-137 to add cost allocation charges associated with the Department of Administration's Administrative Services Division's provision of budgetary and fiscal support to this budget. And those cost allocation charges would be funded through reserve reductions of $74,613 in each year of the 2023-25 biennium. Subcommittee also recommended approval of all other closing items within the division minerals budget as recommended by the governor and authorized fiscal staff to make technical adjustments as necessary. Thank you.
Not only were you alone, you got off easy with the little packet. Members, any questions or on this closing report? See none, I'll accept a motion to approve.
So moved, Madam Chair.
I have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We're moving on to the next item on our agenda, and that is the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs. Thank you. You can go ahead when you're ready. They'll shut up. Just go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Yuri Yakovlev, LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. I'll be presenting the Joint Subcommittee on General Government Closing Report for the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs. The Joint Subcommittee on General Government has completed its review of the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs budgets for the 2023-25 biennium. The closing recommendations of the subcommittee have resulted in an increase in general fund appropriations of $30,878 in fiscal year '24 and a decrease of $149,122 in fiscal year '25 when compared to the governor's recommended budget. The following comments describe the recommendations of the joint subcommittee. The Tourism Development Fund, which is budget account 1522. The subcommittee recommended approval of a department reorganization and to transfer $55.7 million in room tax revenues and 10 full-time positions from the Tourism Development Fund budget to a new Tourism Cultural Affairs Administration budget. The subcommittee further recommended approval of Budget Amendment A233-111522 with a technical adjustment to include the transfer of an unclassified development specialist position and remove the transfer of a management analyst position. The subcommittee recommended approval to transfer room tax revenues of $22.8 million over the 2023-25 biennium back from the new Tourism Cultural Affairs Administration budget to the Tourism Development Fund budget to continue the mission of the Division of Tourism. The subcommittee further recommended approval to add one new unclassified deputy director position to oversee the Division of Tourism and to eliminate two vacant administrative assistant positions to offset a portion of the cost of the new deputy director with a net reduction to reserves of $37,776 over the 2023-25 biennium. Next is the Indian Commission Budget Account 2600. The subcommittee recommended approval to authorize $5 million of coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds in a special use expenditure category in fiscal year 24 for the Grants to Tribes program. Place the remaining $15 million authorized for the program in a dedicated reserve category in fiscal year 24, and eliminate the duplicated $20 million in coronavirus state fiscal recovery fund revenue and expenditure authority in fiscal year 25. The subcommittee further recommended approval of additional coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds of $263,332 in fiscal year 24 and $261,092 in fiscal year 25 for contract positions to assist in administering the Grants to Tribes program. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended issuing a letter of intent directing the agency to provide the interim finance committee with a quarterly report of the agency's progress in administering the Grants to Tribes program and distributing the $20 million in federal coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds. Finally, the subcommittee directed fiscal staff to work with the Nevada Indian Commission and the Governor's Finance Office to provide information for consideration by the full money committees to establish a standalone Nevada Indian Commission agency. The subcommittee requested the following information: identification of statutory changes that would be required to establish the Nevada Indian Commission as a standalone agency, identification of comparable positions within state government to the executive director of the Nevada Indian Commission and the salary level of these comparable positions, consideration of whether both the Nevada Indian Commission and Stewart Indian School Living Legacy budgets should be part of the standalone agency, timeline considerations to ensure the Nevada Indian Commission has the necessary administrative resources and sufficient time to plan for organizational impacts to operate as a standalone agency, identification of any additional costs that would result from the proposal, and the number of additional positions and position types that may be needed to support the Nevada Indian Commission as a standalone agency compared to similar-sized agencies. As directed, fiscal staff worked with the Nevada Indian Commission, the Governor's Finance Office, and reports the following to the money committees. Enabling legislation to amend Chapters 231 and 233A of the Nevada Revised Statute would be required to establish the Nevada Indian Commission as a standalone agency. The money committees may wish to consider legislation with an effective date of July 1st, 2024, which would ensure the commission has sufficient time to plan for the organizational impacts of operating as a standalone agency. In working with the agency, it is estimated that additional general fund appropriations of $254,153 in fiscal year 24 and $412,640 in fiscal year 25 would be needed for the new standalone agency if the committees want to fully fund the Nevada Indian Commission budget with general fund appropriations. The following information details the projected expenditures to support the proposal requested by the subcommittee. So first is $217,224 in fiscal year 24 and $289,473 in fiscal year 25 for 3 new management analyst positions and associated operating and equipment expenditures. $36,929 in fiscal year 24 and $36,925 in fiscal year 25 to increase the salary of the existing executive director position, and then $86,242 in fiscal year 25 to replace room tax revenue transfers with general fund appropriations, which would eliminate room tax revenue transfers as a funding source for the new standalone agency. According to the agency, 3 new management analyst positions, grade 35, step 7, would expand the services provided to Nevada tribes in the areas of environmental justice, economic development, and education and cultural preservation. The agency indicates these 3 areas of focus were determined through consultation with tribal governments and community members. The agency further indicates the 3 new management analyst positions would be responsible for consulting with tribes, gathering data, determining tribal needs, and reviewing, evaluating, and suggesting amendments to legislation to improve existing policies and statutes. If approved, the 3 new positions are recommended to start on October 1st, 2023 to allow the agency to develop the program functions for the positions and ensure staffing is in place prior to the transition of the Indian Commission to a standalone agency. Additionally, the money committees may wish to consider an increase to the salary of the unclassified executive director position from an annual salary of $79,806 to $111,313, an increase of $36,929 in fiscal year '24 and $36,925 in fiscal year '25, inclusive of the costs of benefits. This salary increase would align the salary of the Executive Director of the Nevada Indian Commission with the salaries of division administrators within the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs. Based on the Division of Human Resource Management's unclassified position tier list, the increased salary would also be commensurate with the Director of the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission. Decisions pertaining to unclassified salaries will be determined by the money committees when the pay bill is considered. Regarding the Stewart Indian School Living Legacy budget, which is budget account 2601, the agency indicates that if a standalone agency is created, the budget should be a part of the standalone agency as it is tied to the tribal history in Nevada. The Stewart Indian School Living Legacy budget is currently funded with general fund appropriations and room tax revenues. So do the committees wish to approve establishing a new standalone Nevada Indian Commission agency beginning in fiscal year 2025, contingent upon passage and approval of enabling legislation? If so, do the committees wish to approve the following? A, general fund appropriations of $217,224 in fiscal year 2024, and $289,473 in fiscal year 2025 for 3 new management analyst positions and associated operating and equipment expenditures. And B, general fund appropriations of $86,242 in fiscal year 2025 to replace room tax revenue transfers with general fund appropriations, thereby eliminating room tax revenue transfers as a funding source for the Nevada Indian Commission budget. If approved, the committee should request enabling legislation be drafted to facilitate the recommendation.
Thank you so much. This has been a conversation I think we've had since the beginning of session. I'm happy to see it actually in writing. So with that, I will accept a motion to approve A, the general fund appropriations, with the addition of, to increase the existing salary of the existing executive director contingent upon being approved in the pay bill, and also approve B, along with the enabling legislation to be drafted to facilitate the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This makes me happy too. So with that, I would make the motion to approve that as read by Chair.
I have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Bacchus. Discussion, Senator Gansert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question. We had some other legislation about having a liaison in every agency, and I didn't know if this was going to replace part of that, but, give them the commission and work together, or whether, because I don't think we have liaisons in every agency. We have them in some agencies, but not all agencies, and then this is, so maybe I can ask staff if there's any plan for that.
Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I do have a piece of legislation related to this, so I thought I could speak to it a little bit. So we have a current statute requires that agencies that regularly interact with tribes must designate an existing employee as a tribal liaison. So that's the current statute that's in place. I brought forward a piece of legislation, I believe it's in Senate Finance right now, to have the creation of explicit tribal liaison positions. The legislation as drafted envision that within all agencies. I have an idea to scale that back a little bit and try and find a middle ground, but that's a separate conversation, I think, from moving the commission out as its own entity. I think that this has value regardless of whether we keep the liaison program the way it is or decide to augment that in some way. Just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Yuri Yakovlev, LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. Next is the Stewart Indian School Living Legacy, Budget Account 2601. The subcommittee recommended approval of general fund appropriations of $70,743 and room tax revenue transfers of $115,422 over the 2023-25 biennium for one new Curator 2 position and general fund appropriations of $6,000 and room tax revenue transfers of $9,791 over the 2023-25 biennium to reclassify one existing Curator 2 position to a Curator 3 position as recommended by the Governor. Nevada Magazine, Budget Account 1530, the subcommittee recommended approval to transfer revenue and expenditure authority of $2.5 million over the 2023-25 biennium, including 8 positions from the Nevada Magazine budget to the Tourism Development Fund budget, thereby eliminating the Nevada Magazine budget, as recommended by the Governor, contingent upon passage and approval of enabling legislation to effectuate the recommendation. Destination Development, Budget Account 1523, the subcommittee recommended approval of room tax revenue transfers of $950,000 in fiscal year 25 to support the Destination Development Grant Program as recommended by the Governor. Nevada Humanities, Budget Account 2894, the subcommittee recommended approval to increase general fund appropriations by $75,000 in each fiscal year for a total funding of $200,000 in each year of the 2023-25 biennium to support the Nevada Humanities. Nevada Historical Society, Budget Account 2870, the subcommittee recommended approval of general fund appropriations of $53,836 and room tax revenue transfers of $65,798 over the 2023-25 biennium for one new facility supervisor position as recommended by the Governor. The Nevada State Railroad Museums, Budget Account 4216. The subcommittee recommended approval of Budget Amendment A231474216 as recommended by the Governor, which eliminates funding to establish a general fund reserve and support increased facilities maintenance and operating expenditures associated with the Boulder City Museum, resulting in general fund savings of $289,050 over the 2023-25 biennium. The subcommittee recommended approval of all other closing items within the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs budgets as recommended by the Governor and with technical adjustments noted by staff, and authorized fiscal staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary. The subcommittee recommended closing the following Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs budgets as recommended in the executive budget with or without minor or technical adjustments. Cultural Affairs Administration, 1520, Museums and History, 2941, Lost City Museum, 1350, Nevada State Museum, Carson City, 2940, Nevada State Museum, Las Vegas, 2943, and finally the Nevada Arts Council, 2979. And that concludes this report.
Thank you so much. Members, do you have any questions on any of the other items in this closing report? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion to approve.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have a motion from Senator Dondero-Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Backus. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much. And the next item on our agenda is the Department of Health and Human Services Division of Child and Family Services. I am so sorry. You can start whenever you're ready.
Good evening, members of the committees. My name is Chris English from LCB Fiscal for the record. I'll be presenting the Joint Subcommittee on Human Services closing report for the Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Child and Family Services. The Joint Subcommittee on Human Services has completed its review of the Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Child and Family Services, DCFS budgets for the 2023 to 25 biennium. The closing recommendations of the subcommittee result in decreases in general fund appropriations of $1.2 million in fiscal year 2024 and $1.3 million in fiscal year 2025 when compared to the recommendations in the executive budget. A total of 4 major closing issues were deferred to the committees from the Washoe County Child Welfare, Clark County Child Welfare, Youth Alternative Placement, and Victims of Crime budgets. Fiscal staff has presented the decisions for the committees in the relevant sections below. The comments below describe the more significant recommendations of the subcommittee. Victim Services, Budget 4894. The subcommittee recommended approval of a transfer of $31.5 million in federal Victims of Crime and Family Violence Prevention Services funding from the DCFS administration budget to establish a new Victim Services budget as recommended by the governor. Washoe County Child Welfare, Budget 3141. The subcommittee recommended approval of updated March 2023 adoption subsidy caseload funding reductions totaling $178,766, $75,778 general fund over the 2023 to 25 biennium. Fiscal staff received the most recent federal medical assistant percentage, FMAP rate updates, which were provided by the department on April 6th, 2023. And after incorporating the most recent rates, fiscal staff recommends an additional technical adjustment, which adjusts the general fund share by $1,220 to $76,998. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended approval of $3.2 million, $2.2 million general fund over the 2023 to 25 biennium to support statewide foster care rate increases for family foster care, advanced and specialized foster care, kinship guardianship, and court jurisdiction programs as recommended by the governor. The subcommittee also recommended approval of $84,280 in general fund appropriations each year of the 2023 to 25 biennium to restore respite funding to FY 2023 legislatively approved levels as recommended by the governor. The following issue, which fiscal staff became aware of after the subcommittee made its closing recommendations, affects the Washoe County Child Welfare, Clark County Child Welfare, and Rural Child Welfare budgets. The subcommittee recommended approval of approximately $1.1 million, $458,156 general fund over the 2023 to 25 biennium to support extended foster care subsidies for young adults aged 18 to 21 who choose to participate in kinship guardianship and court jurisdiction programs as recommended by the governor. The subcommittee also recommended approval of $23,587, $15,443 general fund to apply the same foster care rate increases mentioned previously to the 18 to 21-year-old population who choose to participate in kinship guardianship or court jurisdiction programs. However, after the subcommittee closing on April 14th, 2023, it was confirmed that if this extended foster care program is funded, the program would not be eligible for Title IV-E matching funding. According to the agency, in order to be eligible for Title IV-E reimbursement for extended young adult support services programs, all child welfare programs, including adoption subsidies for the 18 to 21-year-old population, also needed to be funded, not just the court jurisdiction and kinship guardianship young adults. Funding for the other programs to serve the 18 to 21-year-old young adult population is not included in the executive budget. Additionally, the agency clarified that even if funding were available, programmatic concerns presented by Washoe and Clark County Child Welfare indicate that the child welfare agencies would not be ready to implement the new extended young adult support services program during the 2023 to 25 biennium. Relatedly, Senate Bill 380, which has been referred to the Senate Committee on Finance, amends Section 37 of Chapter 419, Statutes of Nevada 2021, page 2736, to extend the required implementation date of the Extended Young Adult Support Services Program from January 1st, 2024 to the sooner of July 1st, 2025, or the division indicating sufficient funding exists to implement the program. Therefore, based upon this information, fiscal staff recommends that the committees not approve the joint subcommittee's recommendation and not approve approximately $1.1 million, $458,156 general fund over the 2023 to 25 biennium to support extended foster care subsidies for young adults aged 18 to 21 who choose to participate in kinship guardianship or court jurisdiction programs in the Washoe County budget, or the $23,587, $15,443 general fund to apply foster care rate increases as recommended by the governor. However, if Senate Bill 380 or other enabling legislation to extend the program implementation date is not passed and approved, the agency budgets would not include sufficient funding to comply with the existing January 1st, 2024 implementation date. The decision for the subcommittees, Decision Unit E372, the subcommittee recommended approval of $1.1 million, $458,156 general fund over the 2023 to 25 biennium to support extended foster care subsidies for young adults aged 18 to 21 who choose to participate in kinship guardianship or court jurisdiction programs as recommended by the governor, including the noted technical adjustment. Decision Unit E373, the subcommittee recommended approval of $23,587, $15,443 general fund to apply the same foster care rate increases, including in Major Closing Issue 2, to the 18 to 21-year-old population who choose to participate in kinship guardianship or court jurisdiction programs. Do the committees wish to not approve Decision Units E372 and E373 as recommended by the subcommittee and the governor?
Thank you so much for that explanation and presentation. And with that, I'll accept a motion not to approve Decision Units E372 and E373 as recommended by staff, by the subcommittee and the governor.
So moved, Madam Chair.
I have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Backus. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Due to the temporary enhanced FMAP rate ending, the governor recommended $1.2 million in general fund appropriations over the 2023 to 25 biennium to offset a decrease in federal Title IV funding in the Washoe County Child Welfare budget. However, the subcommittee deferred making a decision on this major closing issue to the full committees to give the governor's finance office and the agency an opportunity to submit a budget amendment because there was an error in the base budget that also affected this decision unit. Subsequent to the subcommittee closing, Budget Amendment A23-300-3141 was submitted to address the base budget error, which recommends increasing general fund appropriations by $818,612 in each year of the 2023 to 25 biennium, and correspondingly funding a shortfall in the adoption subsidy expenditure category. The decision for the committees, do the committees wish to approve Budget Amendment A23-003-141 to increase general fund appropriations by $818,612 in each year of the biennium of the 2023 to 25 biennium to fund a base budget shortfall in the adoption subsidy expenditure category over the 2023 to 25 biennium?
Thank you. And with that, I'll accept a motion to approve.
So moved, Madam Chair.
I have a first from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Backus. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Additionally, although FMAP rates were expected to decrease, the updated FMAP rates provided by the department on April 6, 2023 were lower than expected.
Fiscal staff recommends a technical adjustment to increase the E378 decision unit by $311 in general fund appropriations in fiscal year 2024 and $102,535 in fiscal year 2025, and a corresponding decrease in federal Medicaid reimbursement revenue. As a result of this technical adjustment, general fund appropriations increase from the $1.2 million recommended by the governor over the 2023 to 25 biennium to $1.3 million. Decision for the subcommittee. Do the committees wish to approve $1.3 million in general fund appropriations over the 2023 to 25 biennium to offset a scheduled decrease in the FMAP rate as recommended by the governor with the noted technical adjustment?
Thank you so much. I'll accept a motion to approve.
So moved, Madam Chair.
I have a first from Senator Don Darrell Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Clark County Child Welfare Budget 3142. The subcommittee recommended approval of updated March 2023 adoption subsidy caseloads totaling $6.7 million, $2.8 million general fund over the 2023 to 25 biennium. Fiscal staff received the most recent FMAP updates, which were provided by the department on April 6th, 2023. And after incorporating the most recent rates, fiscal staff recommends an additional technical adjustment to adjust the general fund share by $33,310. The subcommittee also recommended approval of $20.1 million, $13.9 million general fund over the 2023 to 25 biennium to support statewide foster care rate increases for family foster care, advanced and specialized foster care, kinship, guardianship, and court jurisdiction programs as recommended by the governor, and $12.7 million, $8.6 million general fund over the 2023 to 25 biennium to fund additional advanced specialized foster care rate increases as recommended by the governor with technical adjustments. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended approval of $134,209 in general fund appropriations in each year of the 2023 to 25 biennium to fund both traditional and therapeutic respite services within the Clark County Child Welfare budget as recommended by the governor. The subcommittee recommended approval of $2.2 million, $1.6 million general fund over the 2023 to 25 biennium to support extended foster care subsidies for youth aged 18 to 21 who choose to participate in kinship, guardianship, or court jurisdiction programs as recommended by the governor with a technical adjustment. Subcommittee also recommended approval of $156,190, $87,103 general fund to apply the same foster care rate increases mentioned above to the 18 to 21-year-old population who choose to participate in kinship, guardianship, or court jurisdiction programs. As noted with the Washoe County Child Welfare budget, fiscal staff recommends that the committees not approve the recommended funding for extended foster care subsidies for the kinship, guardianship, and court jurisdiction programs consistent with the committee's action for the Washoe County budget. The decision for the committees. Decision Unit E372. The subcommittee recommended approval of $2.2 million, $1.6 million general fund over the 2023 to 25 biennium to support extended foster care subsidies for young adults aged 18 to 21 who choose to participate in kinship, guardianship, or court jurisdiction programs as recommended by the governor, including the noted technical adjustment. Decision Unit E373. The subcommittee recommended approval of $156,190, $87,103 general fund to apply the same foster care rate increases included in Major Closing Issue 2 to the 18 to 21-year-old population who choose to participate in kinship, guardianship, or court jurisdiction programs. Do the committees wish to not approve decision units E372 and E373 as recommended by the committee, as recommended by the subcommittee and the governor?
Thank you so much. And with that, I'll accept a motion to not approve decision units E372 and E373.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I'll make that motion.
I have a motion from Senator Don Darrell Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Due to the temporary enhanced FMAP rate ending, the governor recommended approval of $6.9 million in general fund appropriations over the 2023 to 25 biennium to offset a scheduled decrease in federal Title IV-E funding in the Clark County Child Welfare budget. However, the subcommittee also deferred making a decision on this major closing issue to the full committees to give the governor's finance office and the agency an opportunity to submit a budget amendment, because there was an error in the base budget that also affected this decision unit. Subsequent to the subcommittee closing, Budget Amendment A233213-142 was submitted to address the base budget error, which recommends increasing general fund appropriations by $1.3 million in each year of the 2023 to 25 biennium and funding a corresponding shortfall in the adoption subsidy expenditure category. The decision for the committees. Do the committees wish to approve Budget Amendment A233213-142 to increase general fund appropriations by $1.3 million in each year of the 2023 to 25 biennium and fund a base budget shortfall in the adoption subsidy expenditure category over the 2023 to 25 biennium?
Thank you. With that, I'll accept a motion to approve.
So moved, Madam Chair.
I have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Additionally, the updated FMAP rates provided by the department on April 6, 2023 were lower than expected. Fiscal staff recommends a technical adjustment to increase the E378 decision unit by $2 in general fund appropriations in FY 2024 and $378,076 in FY 2025, and a corresponding decrease of the same amounts in federal Medicaid reimbursement revenue. As a result of this technical adjustment, general fund appropriations increased from the aforementioned $6.9 million over the 2023 to 25 biennium to $7.2 million. A decision for the subcommittees. Do the committees wish to approve $7.2 million in general fund appropriations over the 2023 to 25 biennium to offset a scheduled decrease in the FMAP rate as recommended by the governor with the noted technical adjustment?
Thank you. And I'll accept a motion to approve.
So moved, Madam Chair.
I have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rural Child Welfare, Budget 3229. The subcommittee recommended approval of updated March 2023 adoption subsidy caseload totaling $956,054, $658,926 general fund over the 2023 to 25 biennium. Fiscal staff received the most recent FMAP updates, which were provided by the department on April 6, 2023, and after incorporating the most recent rates, fiscal staff recommends an additional technical adjustment, which adjusts the general fund share by $3,624 to $662,550. The subcommittee also recommended approval of $2.1 million, $1.6 million general fund as adjusted over the 2023 to 25 biennium to support statewide foster care rate increases for family foster care, advanced and specialized foster care, kinship, guardianship, and court jurisdiction programs as recommended by the governor, including technical adjustments to correct the advanced foster care and the court jurisdiction program daily rates. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended approval of $56,442, $43,126 general fund over the 2023 to 25 biennium to support extended foster care subsidies for youth aged 18 to 21 who choose to participate in kinship, guardianship, or court jurisdiction programs as recommended by the governor, including a technical adjustment. The subcommittee also recommended approval of $14,470, $11,066 general fund to apply the same foster care rate increases mentioned above to the 18 to 21-year-old population who choose to participate in kinship, guardianship, or court jurisdiction programs. However, consistent with the Washoe County and Clark County child welfare budgets, Fiscal staff recommends that the committees not approve the recommended funding for extended foster care subsidies for the kinship, guardianship, and court jurisdiction programs. The decision for the committees. Decision Unit E372, the subcommittee recommended approval of $56,442, $43,126 general fund over the 23 to 25 biennium to support extended foster care subsidies for young adults aged 18 to 21 who choose to participate in kinship, guardianship, or court jurisdiction programs as recommended by the governor, including the noted technical adjustment. Decision Unit E373, the subcommittee recommended approval of $14,470, $11,066 general fund to apply the same foster care rate increases included in Major Closing Issue 2 to the 18 to 21-year-old population who choose to participate in kinship, guardianship, or court jurisdiction programs. Do the committees wish to not approve Decision Units E372 and E373 as recommended by the subcommittee and the governor?
Thank you for that, and I will accept a motion to not approve decision units E372 and E373.
So moved, Madam Chair.
I have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The subcommittee also recommended approval of $372,300, $285,038 general fund over the 23 to 25 biennium within the base budget to fund contract services to provide high acuity services to specialized foster care youth at a rate of $340 per day, as recommended by the governor, funded in a special use budget category to make expenditures easier to track. Family Support Program, Budget 3146. The subcommittee recommended approval of the new Family Support Program budget with total net funding of $38.4 million over the 2023 to 25 biennium, and the net transfer in of 38 positions as recommended by the governor, with a technical adjustment to align revenue sources. Youth Alternative Placement, Budget 3147. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation of $8.0 million over the 2023 to 25 biennium to support the China Spring, Aurora Pines, and Spring Mountain youth camps, including budget amendment A230-573-147, which would return funding to the FY 2022 legislatively approved amounts of $3.6 million general fund and $4.4 million county participation funds over the 2023 to 25 biennium. The subcommittee also directed fiscal staff to present an option to the full committees to increase funding to China Spring, Aurora Pines to the FY 2021 legislatively approved amount, which would add $398,849 in general fund appropriations in each fiscal year. Decision for the committees. Do the committees wish to approve an additional $398,849 in general fund appropriations in FY 2024 and FY 2025 for the China Spring Aurora Pines Camp, which would return funding to the FY 2021 legislatively approved amounts of $4.4 million general fund and $4.4 million county participation funds over the 2023 to 25 biennium when added to the amounts recommended by the subcommittee.
Thank you so much for that. Members, on your desk tonight, you have a letter dated April 20th, 2021. It's from the last legislative session. There was an agreement made on this budget account 3147, Youth Alternative Placement. And you see that there was going to be, during that legislative session, a large cut, I believe 71%, but there was an agreement made to have a step down cut where the counties would take more of the obligation of payment and the state would take less. I know that there was a working group that worked throughout the interim to try to find a solution. As you can see, during our original budget that we received from the governor, the funding returned them back to the 2022 legislatively approved amounts. But as you see on the letter, if there were an option for a one-shot or federal funds to help offset the cuts, we should look at that. So instead of using general funds, it would be, I would accept a motion to approve the additional $398,849 in ARPA funds from the lost revenue funding for this budget. And I would encourage the counties that utilize China Springs to continue working, because this is a one-time funding. I don't know if we'll have it next legislative session, but we can do it this time. And with that, I'll accept a motion to approve.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would make that motion as you stated with the use of ARPA funds.
I have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Backus, and discussion, Senator Titus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to acknowledge that the counties did in good faith meet multiple times, many times to try to solve this. I appreciate that there's still holes. I appreciate that it is not done. And I want to acknowledge the efforts that you have put into it personally to make this the best that we could offer for tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I was a part of many of those meetings. Members, any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Caliente Youth Center, Budget 3179. The subcommittee recommended approval of a reduction of $3.2 million, $3.1 million general fund over the 2023 to 25 biennium to reduce capacity at Caliente Youth Center from 112 beds to 80 beds through the elimination of 19 Group Supervisor 2 positions and associated expenditures as recommended by the governor. Northern Nevada Child and Adolescent Services, Budget 3281. The subcommittee recommended approval of $1.3 million in general fund appropriations and $8,157 in federal Medicaid reimbursement to fund the addition of 7 permanent positions and associated expenditures for the Mobile Crisis Response Team program as recommended by the governor. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended approval of a net funding reduction of $20,175, $1.3 million general fund increase in FY 2025 to change the funding source from Federal American Rescue Plan Act Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Funds to $1.3 million in general fund appropriations and $261,208 in Medicaid reimbursement funds to continue 22 positions that were added during the 2021 to 23 biennium, and to add 1 accounting assistant as recommended by the governor. The subcommittee recommended approval of $1.6 million in American Rescue Plan Act Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Funds in FY 2024 as recommended by the governor to continue funding for mobile crisis response positions at Washoe County School District, to continue funding for public service intern positions, and to continue funding for early childhood day treatment program services for children with severe emotional disturbance. Southern Nevada Child and Adolescent Services, Budget 3646. The subcommittee recommended approval of $1.8 million, $1.7 million general fund to fund 9 positions and associated expenditures, including 8 positions for the Southern Nevada Child and Adolescent Services Mobile Crisis Response Team program, and 1 new accounting assistant as recommended by the governor. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended approval of a net funding increase of $332,900, $2.4 million general fund in FY 2025 to change the funding from American Rescue Plan Act Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Funds to $2.4 million general fund appropriations and $184,486 in Medicaid reimbursement funds to continue 25 positions that were added in the 2021 to 23 biennium, and to add 5 new accounting assistants as recommended by the governor. The subcommittee also recommended approval of federal fund reductions totaling $2.5 million over the 2023 to 25 biennium to eliminate 14 positions due to the expiration of the Federal System of Care Grant and the Federal Pediatric Mental Health Care Access Grant on September 29th, 2023, as recommended by the governor. The subcommittee considered 2 decision units related to staffing the Desert Willow Treatment Center at full capacity of 54 beds. The current combined census at Desert Willow Treatment Center and Oasis, from which youth will transfer to Desert Willow Treatment Center on or around July 1st, 2023, is 25 youth. The subcommittee recommended approval of transferring in 22 positions funded with $3.6 million, $1.5 million general fund effective July 1st, 2023, from the Northern Nevada Child and Adolescent Services budget to the Southern Nevada Child and Adolescent Services budget as recommended by the governor. In considering the governor's recommendation for 56 new positions, the subcommittee considered that a previously approved facility hardening project is scheduled to occur from February 2024 to March 2025, which will necessitate 1 unit of 10 beds be held vacant for the duration of the project. The agency indicated with 1 unit vacant, 23 positions would not be needed during the project. Accordingly, the subcommittee recommended approval of $6.8 million, $3.2 million general fund to support 33 new positions and associated expenditures to staff the Desert Willow Treatment Center for a capacity of 44 beds until March 2025, which would hold 23 positions vacant from October 2023 through February 2025, and to fund all 56 positions for the full capacity of 54 beds starting in March 2025, resulting in $1.2 million general fund in savings when compared to the amount recommended by the governor. The subcommittee recommended placing the $1.2 million general fund savings in the interim finance committee's contingency account as a restricted allocation available to the agency in the event that it can demonstrate a need to add positions, and recommended the issuance of a letter of intent requiring the agency report on a semi-annual basis on its progress in filling positions, the average bed census, progress completing the hardening project, and any information it would require to release funds from the contingency account. Lastly, the subcommittee recommended approval of $2.4 million in ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act, Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Funds in fiscal year 2024, as recommended by the governor, to continue funding for mobile crisis response positions at Clark County School District, to continue funding for public service intern positions, and to continue funding for early childhood day treatment program services for children with severe emotional disturbance. Victims of Crime, Budget 4895. The subcommittee deferred decision units E300 and E500 to the full committees and directed fiscal staff to bring recommendations, inclusive of American Rescue Plan Act, Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Funds, to the full committees for consideration regarding an issue resulting from a projected shortfall in federal Victims of Crime formula grant funds. The governor recommends the addition of $6.5 million in general fund appropriations to the budget, with the intent to replace $2.1 million in court administrative assessment revenues and to provide an additional $4.4 million to provide the Victims of Crime budget with reliable funding to pay claims over the 2023 to 25 biennium. Decision for the committees. Decision units E300 and E500. Do the committees wish to approve the governor's recommendation of $6.5 million in general fund appropriations over the 2023 to 25 biennium to replace court assessment fees of $2.1 million and to provide $4.4 million of additional general fund to support the budget with a corresponding $2.1 million reduction in court administrative assessment revenue, including a technical adjustment to remove remaining court administrative assessment revenue?
Thank you, and with that, I'll accept a motion to approve.
So moved, Madam Chair.
I have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Subsequent to the budget hearing, the agency learned that its federal fiscal year 2023 federal victims compensation formula grant allocation was $1 million, which is $1.3 million less than the FY 2022 award and significantly less than the $2.3 million budgeted in FY 2024 and FY 2025. According to the agency, if the grant continues at similarly reduced levels, it would create a shortfall of $2.3 million over the 2023 to 25 biennium, and if this shortfall is not addressed, the agency would be unable to fund all victims' compensation claims. The agency indicated that being able to pay victims' compensation claims is critical, as eligibility for Victims of Crime Assistance Fund Fed VOCA grant awards, which total an estimated $25.2 million over the 2023 to 25 biennium, as reflected in the Victim Services Budget closing document, is contingent on the agency's ability to pay victims' compensation claims. Following the subcommittee budget closing on April 25th, 2023, where the estimated $2.3 million shortfall for this budget was presented, the Governor's Finance Office submitted Budget Amendment A233244-895, which recommends 4 changes to the Victims of Crime budget. First, due to the general fund being added to this budget over the 2023 to 25 biennium to replace court assessment revenue, the budget amendment recommends spending down and eliminating the reserve from this budget. Second, deletion of federal anti-terrorism and emergency assistance program grant revenues of $485,695 in fiscal year 2024, as the grant expires September 30th, 2023. Third, federal Victims of Crime compensation grant funding increased from the $1.0 million presented as an estimate in the budget closing to $1.9 million in fiscal year 2025, based upon actual state expenditures that will determine the FY 2025 federal Victims of Crime compensation grant allocation. Fourth, reducing the victims' payment expenditure category by $1.1 million over the 2023 to 25 biennium to $5.1 million in fiscal year 2024 and $4.8 million in fiscal year 2025. However, this reduces the amount budgeted for victims' payments below the 3-year average of $5.2 million. Decision for the committees. Do the committees wish to approve Budget Amendment A233244-895 to spend down and eliminate the budget reserve to remove $485,695 in anti-terrorism and emergency assistance program grant funds from the budget, to revise the amount budgeted for the Victims of Crime compensation grant award in fiscal year 2025 to $1.9 million, and to reduce the amount budgeted for victims' payments category to $5.1 million in fiscal year 2024 and $4.8 million to fund the Victims of Crime budget for the 2023 to 25 biennium? Or do the committees wish to approve Budget Amendment A233244-895 to spend down and eliminate the budget reserve, to remove the $485,695 in anti-terrorism and emergency assistance program grant funds from the budget, to revise the amount budgeted for the Victims of Crime compensation grant award in fiscal year 2025 to $1.9 million, and to reduce the amount budgeted for victims' payments to $5.1 million in fiscal year 2024 and $4.8 million and $4.8 million, but add American Rescue Plan Act Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Funds of $138,136 in fiscal year 2024 and $437,210 in fiscal year 2025 to restore the victims' payments category to the 3-year expenditure average to fund the Victims of Crime budget for the 2023 to 25 biennium.
Thank you. Members, we have 2 options, the option A at the top or B at the bottom, and I will accept a motion to approve B with the added American Rescue Plan Act dollars.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So moved.
I have a first from Senator Don Darrell Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Senator Ganser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we had some discussions about this when we were in the regular committee, and I guess we have gained more information now. And I think we all agree that the Victims of Crime Fund is very important. So at this time, I think we should support B, given that we do have some funds that we can use to bridge this. So I appreciate the alternative. Thank you.
Senator Nguyen.
Thank you. I obviously have those same concerns. I just want to make sure, and I don't know if there's someone there from, that can answer this question. I just want to confirm that if we, with option B, that this will provide enough money that we won't be cutting any of those discretionary payments. And this will cover those payments. And then with that being said, I guess part two is that it's my understanding that they will, I guess I should say. I know it's a discussion on the motion, but, and so I'm glad to hear that that will cover that. And I would love to find ways to expand some of this matching dollars.
So not a question, just a statement? A comment? Okay, just wanted to make sure. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none? Okay. Senator Harris.
Thank you, Chair. I do think there might have been a question in there. Is this going to be enough to kind of head off the cuts in discretionary funding? And if not, then that's a question I'd like to ask. Thank you.
We have a phone a friend coming down.
Good evening, Melanie Young, Deputy Administrator for the Division of Child and Family Services. We believe the 3-year average is really close to what we're trending for the payments for the past 3 years. So that would be sufficient.
All right, thank you. That's all I need to hear. Appreciate it.
Senator Canzaro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think with that, and that would be my understanding, that there was a budget amendment submitted that still falls below that 3-year average. And so I am supportive of doing this second piece that would allow us to also add those ARPA dollars to get us to that 3-year average so that we aren't at risk of cutting any services. And so I'm supportive of the motion. But just wanted to clarify that that was, I think, an important piece, that there was that additional ARPA dollars to cover that shortfall.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To provide the agency with flexibility in paying victims' claims, fiscal staff also recommends that new language be added to the 2023 Appropriations Act to allow general fund appropriations in the Victims of Crime budget to be transferred between each fiscal year of the 2023 to 25 biennium upon the recommendation of the governor and the approval of the interim finance committee. Fiscal staff also recommends that language be added to the 2023 Authorizations Act to exempt this budget from the requirement that general fund appropriations be reduced to the extent that funding received from other sources exceeds the budgeted amounts over the 2023 biennium. Decision for the committees. Do the committees wish to add language to the 2023 Appropriations Act to allow general fund appropriations in the Victims of Crime budget to be transferred between each fiscal year of the 2023 to 25 biennium, and to add language to the 2023 Authorizations Act to exempt this budget from the requirement that general fund appropriations be reduced to the extent that funding received from other sources exceeds the budgeted amounts over the 2023 to 25 biennium?
Thank you so much. And with that, I'll accept a motion to approve.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll make that motion.
I have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you so much. Moving on to the rest of this budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The subcommittee also recommended approval of $242,407, $212,363 general fund to support 1 crime victim compensation specialist and 1 administrative assistant for the Victims of Crime program as recommended by the governor. The subcommittee recommended approval of all other closing items with the exception of the compensation-related other closing items that were decided at the statewide compensation closing within the division budget that were presented to the subcommittee as recommended by the governor with noted technical adjustments, and authorize fiscal staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary. The subcommittee recommended closing the following DCFS budgets as recommended in the executive budget or with minor technical adjustments. And 3 budgets in the list below, Juvenile Justice Services, Summit View Youth Center, and Youth Parole Services, have compensation-related decisions that were recommended to be deferred to the statewide compensation closing decided by the committees at the statewide compensation closing. Children, Youth, and Family Administration, 3145. Victims of Domestic Violence, 3181. Information Services, 3143. Children's Trust Account, 3201. Child Welfare Trust, 3242. Transition from Foster Care, 3250. Review of Death of Children, 3251. Juvenile Justice Services, 1383. Summit View Youth Center, 3148. Nevada Youth Training Center, 3259. Youth Parole Services, 3263. And this concludes the closing report.
Thank you so much. That was long. Members, any questions on any of the other details in this closing report? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion to approve.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much. Then that brings us to the next item on our agenda, the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. You can start whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committees. Justin Luna, LCB Fiscal. I'm joined tonight by Kimbra Ellsworth, and we'll be presenting the Joint Subcommittee on Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation closing report for the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. The Joint Subcommittee on Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation completed its review of the budgets for the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, DCNR, for the 2023-25 biennium. The closing recommendations of the subcommittee result in a general fund increase of $1,502,046 in fiscal year 2024 and $2,107,574 in fiscal year 2025. The following comments describe the more significant recommendations of the Joint Subcommittee. Office of State Historic Preservation, 101-4205. Subcommittee recommended approval of $164,174, including $47,824 in general fund appropriations over the 2023-25 biennium to fund a new Historic Preservation Specialist 3 to support historic preservation reviews. Water Conservation and Infrastructure, 101-4159. Subcommittee recommended approval of Federal American Rescue Plan Act Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Funds of $49.8 million in each year of the 2023-25 biennium to continue funding for the Water Conservation and Infrastructure budget for the support of water projects as recommended by the Governor. Conservation Districts Program 101-4151. Subcommittee recommended approval of the Governor's recommendation of general fund appropriations of $14,000 in fiscal year 2024 and $14,000 in fiscal year 2025 to increase the funding to each of the 28 conservation districts to $4,500. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended approval of an additional $14,000 in general fund appropriations for fiscal year 2025 to increase the increase funding for each of the 28 conservation districts to $5,000 beginning in fiscal year 2025. Subcommittee recommended approval of additional general fund appropriations of $10,000 in each year of the 2023-25 biennium to increase the sage grouse competitive grant awards available to the conservation districts throughout the state, as recommended by the governor. State Parks 101-4162. Subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for one new project manager 1 and budget amendment A23-129-4162 to add one new personnel technician 3 as adjusted, funded with general fund appropriations of $196,030 and $130,017 over the 2023-25 biennium respectively to support ongoing operational needs. Subcommittee also recommended approval of gift shop revenue of $528,810 over the 2023-25 biennium to continue funding for 4 retail storekeeper positions added during the interim as adjusted, add 1 new retail storekeeper position, and reclassify 1 existing retail storekeeper 1 to a retail storekeeper 2 to support gift shop operations. Water Resources 101-4171. Subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation of general fund appropriations totaling $76,928 as adjusted over the 2023-25 biennium to increase the regular operating and maintenance budget for the South Fork Dam. Subcommittee recommended approval of federal ARPA coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds of $4.8 million in fiscal year 2024 and $2.2 million in fiscal year 2025 to continue previously approved funding for the modernization and digitization of state water records and to update water availability data based upon updated information provided by the governor's finance office. Finally, the subcommittee recommended additional enhancements not recommended in the executive budget, funded with general fund appropriations totaling $3.1 million over the 2023-25 biennium. The recommendations include general fund appropriations of $736,362 in fiscal year 2024 and $1,009,518 in fiscal year 2025 for 10 new positions to increase the division's capacity in certain operational sections to a level sufficient to meet its statutory responsibilities and goals. General fund amounts were updated due to technical adjustments in fringe benefit rates. General fund appropriations of $465,677 in fiscal year 2024 and $660,895 in fiscal year 2025 to replace transfers from non-executive budget water basin with general fund. And also general fund appropriations of $17,939 in each year of the 2023-25 biennium to restore training for division staff, and general fund appropriations of $29,639 in each year of the 2023-25 biennium to support USGS gauging contract. Forestry Wildland Fire Protection Program 101-4194. The subcommittee recommended approval of transferring out wildland firefighter personnel and associated costs to the Forestry Administration budget and Wildland Fire Protection Program revenue and reserves as adjusted to the Forest Fire Suppression budget and eliminating the standalone Wildland Fire Protection Program budget. Subcommittee also recommended approval of issuing a letter of intent requiring the agency to provide a report on the effects of the elimination of the Wildland Fire Protection Program budget on operational efficiencies, improvements in overall wildland fire management strategy, and improvements in paying incident responses costs timely. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended approval of county participation fund revenue as adjusted to $2 million in each year of the 2023-25 biennium to support the Wildland Fire Protection Program based on anticipated annual receipts based on program participation. Forestry 101-4195, subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to swap the funding source for firefighter personnel costs from Wildland Fire Protection Program county participation funds to general fund appropriations as adjusted, including the elimination of reserves transferred from the Wildland Fire Protection Program. Subcommittee also recommended approval of the governor's recommendation as adjusted to transfer in and reclassify one position from the conservation camp's budget to a biologist, and to replace 9 seasonal positions with 3 full-time firefighter positions, resulting in increased general fund appropriations of $169,671 over the 2023-25 biennium. Forestry Fire Suppression 101-4196. Subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to support base budget incident response costs of $9.7 million in each year of the 2023-25 biennium, funded with general fund appropriations of $4.7 million in each year of the 2023-25 biennium. Forestry Conservation Caps 101-4198. Subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to consolidate offender labor costs as adjusted, including additional general funds of $30,615 per year from individual conservation camp expenditure categories to a new expenditure category for offender labor costs to provide for flexibility to allow the division to deploy the available offender workforce more efficiently. Additionally, to mitigate the lack of offender work crews, the subcommittee recommended approval of Budget Amendment A232984198, which recommends reclassifying 34 vacant conservation crew supervisor positions to firefighter positions and adding 8 new firefighter positions, resulting in revenue reductions of $24,952, $17,467 in general fund reduction over the 2023-25 biennium. State Lands 101-4173. Subcommittee recommended approval of general fund appropriations of $840,284 in fiscal year 2024 and $63,000 in fiscal year 2025 to replace the division's land management system with a modern solution, and to recommend language for inclusion in the 2023 Appropriations Act to allow general fund appropriations for this project to be transferred between fiscal years upon recommendation of the governor and approval of the interim finance committee. The Nevada Natural Heritage 101-4101. Subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for net additional funding of $323,929, including $379,773 general fund appropriations over the 2023-25 biennium to change the funding source for the existing division administrator and accounting assistant 3 positions and add 2 new biologist 3 positions to increase the agency's capacity to collect and maintain data on rare plants and rare insects. DEP Air Quality 101-3185. The subcommittee recommended approval of additional fee revenue totaling $101,100 over the 2023-25 biennium for the purchase of high-resolution satellite imagery to monitor air quality as recommended by the governor. DEP Materials Management and Corrective Action 101-3187. Subcommittee recommended approval of additional funding of $634,851 in fiscal year 2024, funded with transfers from the hazardous waste management budget to support ongoing environmental cleanup efforts at the Anaconda mine site, as recommended by the governor. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended approval of reserve reductions of $15,000 in fiscal year 2024 and $30,000 in fiscal year 2025, as recommended by the governor, and also recommended approval of additional reserve reductions totaling $48,250 in fiscal year 2024 and $33,250 in fiscal year 2025 to provide funding of $65,000 in each year of the 2023-25 biennium to fund grants to promote sustainable materials management. Lastly, subcommittee recommended approval of a total of $300,000 over the 2023-25 biennium, funded with transfers from the hazardous waste management budget to conduct a waste characterization study as recommended by the governor. Division of Outdoor Recreation 101-4180. Subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation of general fund appropriations of $76,070 over the 2023-25 biennium to fund the development of a new website and increase in-state and out-of-state travel expenditures as recommended by the governor. Subcommittee recommended approval of all other closing items within the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources budgets as recommended by the governor, with technical adjustments noted by staff, and authorized fiscal staff to make technical adjustments as necessary. Subcommittee recommended closing the following Department of Conservation and Natural Resources budgets as recommended by the governor, inclusive of budget amendments with or without minor technical adjustments. Historic Preservation, Comstock Historic District, 101-5030. Administration, 101-4150. Account to restore the sagebrush ecosystem, 101-4156. Environmental Quality Improvement, 101-4160. Count for off-highway vehicles, OHV, 101-4285. Forestry Nurseries, 257-4235. Nevada Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, 101-4166. DEP Administration, 101-3173. DEP Industrial Site Cleanup, 101-3175. DEP Water Pollution Control, 101-3186. DEP Mining Regulation Reclamation, 101-3188. DEP State Revolving Fund Administration, 746-3189. DEP Water Quality Planning, 101-3139. 3193. DEP DEP Safe Drinking Water Program, 101-3197. DEP State Environmental Commission, 101-4149. And DEP Water Planning Capital Improvement, 101-4155. And Madam Chair, that concludes the closing report for DCNR.
Thank you so much. And with that, I will accept a motion to approve.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I make that motion.
I have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, too. Appreciate it. Moving on to the next item on our budget, the Nevada Department of Transportation. Good evening. You can start whenever you want.
Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. Nancy Morris, Fiscal Analysis Division. Tonight I will be presenting the Joint Subcommittee on Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation Closing Report for the Nevada Department of Transportation. The Joint Subcommittee on Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation has completed its review of the Nevada Department of Transportation, or NDOT, budget. The closing actions taken by the subcommittee have resulted in decreases in highway fund authorizations of $6.6 million in fiscal year 2024 and $5.5 million in fiscal year 2025 when compared to the governor's recommended budget. The statewide infrastructure bank 4672, the subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to continue funding this budget with unobligated reserved interest earnings transferred from the bond interest and redemption account totaling $525,463 over the 2023-25 biennium. The subcommittee further recommended including language in the Authorizations Act to allow the bank to utilize unobligated reserved interest earnings in the 2023-25 biennium and issuing a letter of intent instructing the statewide infrastructure bank to report annually to the Interim Finance Committee on the status of the bank's progress towards self-sufficiency. Bond Construction Budget 4663, the subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for the sale of highway revenue bonds and related interest earnings of $151.5 million in fiscal year 2024 for construction projects. Transportation Administration, Budget Account 4660. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation of $518.6 million in fiscal year 2024 and $509.3 million in fiscal year 2025 in the base budget for capital expenditures for various highway construction projects. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to add 50 new positions for the department, funded with highway fund authorizations of $9.9 million over the 2023-25 biennium. The subcommittee further recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for highway fund authorizations of $13.2 million over the 2023-25 biennium to continue facility improvements at the Trinity, Millers, and Biwawi rest facilities, and highway fund authorizations of $800,000 over the 2023-25 biennium to continue upgrading the department's statewide fueling system. In addition, the subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for highway fund authorizations of $29.3 million over the 23-25 biennium to continue enhancing the department's IT systems, and highway fund authorizations of $8.5 million each year of the 23-25 biennium for maintenance contracts. Finally, the subcommittee recommended approval of all other closing items as recommended by the governor, with technical adjustments and authority for fiscal staff to make additional technical adjustments as necessary. And this concludes my report.
Thank you so much. And with that, I'll accept a motion to approve.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So moved.
I have a motion from Senator Don Darrell Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any nays? Seeing none? This motion carries. Thank you so much. It's getting late. But members, there's light at the end of the tunnel. My button's not working. There's light somewhere. We have our last budget closing report, the Silver State Health Insurance Exchange. Thank you so much, and you can start whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Once again, Morgan Barlow, LCB Fiscal. I'm here to present the Joint Subcommittee on General Government closing report for the Silver State Health Insurance Exchange. The Joint Subcommittee on General Government has completed its review of the Silver State Health Insurance Exchange budget request for the 2023-25 biennium. The following comments describe the more significant recommendations of the Joint Subcommittee. Silver State Health Insurance Exchange Administration Account 101-1400. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to expand the broker program from to 9 broker entities in the first year of the biennium and 11 broker entities in the second year of the biennium, and to match the 2021-23 legislatively approved amount for the continued support of navigators, funded with reserve reductions of $327,544 over the 2023-25 biennium. In addition, the subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to support 1 new unclassified benefit manager position and associated expenditures, funded with reserve reductions of $190,225 over the 2023-25 biennium, to provide the operations unit with a dedicated broker liaison to support the exchange's approximately 700 certified brokers. Finally, the subcommittee recommended authorization for fiscal staff to make technical adjustments to the Silver State Health Insurance Exchange budget as necessary. This concludes the report.
You're probably hating us right now to have such a short report. With that, I'll accept a motion to approve.
So moved, Madam Chair.
I have first from Senator Don Darrell Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you so much. And with that, members, that brings us to the very last thing, which is public comment. If we have anyone left here in Carson City that'd like to make public comment, I invite you to the table. I don't see anyone down in Las Vegas to make public comment, and I am not sure if there's anyone that stayed with us online, but if you are and you'd like to call in with public comment, our call-in number is 888-475-4499. The meeting ID for tonight is 822-707-63308, and then please press pound. And with that, we will start here in Carson City. Good evening.
Madam Chair, members of the Joint Committee, Carter Bundy with AFSCME. My apologies for being the last person of the night. I hate to drag it out. So just very quickly want to highlight in the DCFS closing document on page 124, it says that DCSF includes to close the psychiatric residential treatment facility on Enterprise Road in Reno. To close it as a state facility and hand it over to a third party to manage it. Obviously, right now, there are tremendous problems with recruiting and retention across virtually all state agencies, and DCFS is no exception to that. But it's worth noting that the private company also runs Oasis, that is going to win the bid, apparently, because they're the only ones who bid on it, which has a 73% vacancy rate. So this is a real problem. And our thought is, especially treatment for our most vulnerable youth, really ought to be in the public sector where we have the most accountability, transparency, and oversight. Private entities can come and go. It's a lot more difficult to control exactly what happens with a private company. And this is such an important area that we hope that the state will keep this. You will keep this as a public facility. And especially with the great work that so many of you are doing in your other roles working on state compensation, we really think that the new higher state compensation, whatever that final package ends up looking like, ought to be able to be given a chance to see if we can recruit and retain people to fill that in the public sector. Because at the end of the day, taxpayers are paying for it to be done by a private company either way. So you're paying a middleman and then still paying for those employees. So, just wanted to flag that issue, and we hope that you'll consider keeping that in the public sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments tonight. Not seeing anyone else here in Carson City for public comment, and no one in Las Vegas. BPS, do we have anyone join us on the phone lines?
Chair, the public line is open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
Thank you so much. And with that, members, this meeting is adjourned. See you bright and early in the morning.